Hey there, welcome to episode 125 of the FFS Talk audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at 11:32 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time here in the Greater Vegas area on this Thursday, April 16, 2026. New episodes of the FFS Talk audio program are typically released on Thursdays, often in the morning, but not always. Today's title and topic, Our Two-Party System. We're not going to go too political. In fact, this is, technically speaking, this is not political so much as political infrastructure. So fear not. The two-party system, our two-party system, in fact. If you are new to the FFS Talk audio program, if you're unfamiliar, it is designed to be a conversation show where a guest may have a different viewpoint about a particular topic, wherein we discuss, debate, argue about what works, what doesn't, and what we might do about it. I've never had a guest. I don't know if you've ever tried to find guests to talk about things. Well, how many listeners do you have? It's a brave new world for some, but it's all about numbers for others. And to be honest, I really haven't pushed for guests to join in on this. I prefer to think of it as me laying the groundwork for some of these conversations about various topics. So by doing solo episodes like this one today, anyone who would choose to debate or discuss or argue about a particular topic can, if I've already talked about it, start off with my positions, my thoughts, my views as they were at the time of recording a particular episode, and perhaps that would entice them to enter the fray, so to speak. So, and who doesn't like voicing their opinion unopposed? Anyway, so today our two-party system, probably we're going to talk about a couple of other things in coming weeks. At the time of this recording, I'm rereading the Federalist Papers as one input. I've read a few books about the different relationships between different people back in those days. The tenuous friendship between John Adams and Thomas Edison, for example, some other stuff, the mindset of some of the early founding people, famous quotes, a republic if you can keep it. I was reminded by my own self when I was recording an episode of the Coffee Solo audio program yesterday that I need to read some of this stuff more closely. Literally not recalling the national versus federal stance. What's his name? James Madison had some opinions that he wrote about the split nature, the hybrid nature, if you like, of the structure of the federal government, whether there was some, how there was a balance between national and federal interests, states' rights, individual voters, all that. And as I was talking, I was like, I feel like I'm confusing these. So there will be some more reading to do. So yeah, it's not necessarily about political arguments, but really the underlying. And in fact, remember, as we will say today, political parties are not a constitutionally described. There's no provision for political parties in the U.S. Constitution. And I'm sure we all remember or have heard about the first president, George Washington, in his, what do you call that when he's done? He was stepping down. He chose not to have a third and additional term, so he only served 2 4-year terms. So he kind of set that tone. What do you call it when you are done? I'm totally spacing on the term. Anyway, so when he was leaving office at the end of his second term, he advised that political parties are not a good idea. And John Adams immediately, Thomas Jefferson, I'm becoming the second president, and John Adams was third. Do I have that correct? They were in opposing parties. So John Adams was in the Federalist Party when he was the vice president to George Washington. U.S. presidents. Let me make sure I got that right. List of presidents on Wikipedia, my favorite resource. It was John Adams. Why did I think it was Thomas Jefferson was second? So dumb. Federalist, Democratic, Republican, etc. So Oh, you know what it is? Because I always think that Thomas Jefferson is the second president. Always, even after I read this, and I remember thinking, "Oh, that's right." And I keep reminding myself that I gotta undo that memory. So anyway, yeah, John Adams was the only Federalist president, for what that's worth. Anyway, and then James Madison was number 4, the guy who wrote the Constitution for the most part. So some interesting characters back in those days. I must say it 3 times. John Adams was the second president. He was the vice president, so of course he's going to be the president, right? That's how name recognition works. And yeah, John Adams, his vice president was Thomas Jefferson, and they were friends at some point, and then they were not friends at some point, and so on. Aaron Burr. We've all seen the peanut butter commercial, right? You know. Anyway, today's title and topic, of course, our 2-party system. We're going to talk about a little bit of that. This is definitely something to have conversations about. That's the nature of this notion. If you're not familiar with the FFS Talk Audio program, I think I've kind of described it with this long intro. The idea is to have those debates and conversations about a particular topic in a constructive manner, hopefully, so that the outcome is what we might do about it, not what we will do about it. Some things are not so easily repaired, changed, but certainly it's some ideas to come away from a conversation with constructively to say, oh, there is a possibility of doing something about it, or we can come to some agreement about what could be done to reach a solution or a new way of doing something that is agreeable to more than one side of a conversation. If you don't know what FFS stands for, that's a different question all on its own. Hang out with more Irish people. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a brief summary, which I will read to you, and the links for today's episode, including the usual 2 for the channel, for the program, and then 3 additional Wikipedia links with regard to today's topic. So on that note, let's get started. The summary of today's episode, Reexamining the Federalist Papers, and some history and basically the state of affairs that we started with nearly 250 years ago, and needing to reread a little bit more, I think. Our 2-party system could be a part of the problem, hence the topic for today. The links, as usual, the the FFS Talk homepage, ffstalk.com. Someday it will look nice, but primary point of publication eventually. The profile page linking everything, just over 5 years old now, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. You do not need to spend any money. You can if you want to. You will find links to all of my audio programs, my 4.5 weekly, one of them is 5 minutes maximum. So 4 plus a little bit weekly episodes, same day each week for each one. So today is FFS Talk Day. Tomorrow will be Cafe Genius Impresarios. Yesterday was Quaggling Sand. Tuesday is Let's Innovate for Vegas. They're all there. They're all linked to the various places you can find them. In addition, there are some affiliate links, which you're welcome to click through. If you buy anything, I will receive a few pennies. They're mostly coffee beans and some other things I actually use. And don't forget to buy me an update audio program. That 5-minute maximum is published on Monday mornings. It was initially exclusively at buymeacoffee.com/danhugo/posts, but that's not the way to host a podcast. So it is still published there exclusively for 2 hours. And then it is automatically posted to all the usual places: Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, the RSS feed, etc. Thank you for your moral support, at least. The history of the U.S. political parties, there's a Wikipedia page that gives a pretty decent rundown. There's a nice colorful map of political parties, which party ran for which, which candidate ran for which parties in which these are presidential elections. Political parties obviously extend beyond that particular office, but that's the one that gets attention. Maybe that needs to change too. The voter breakdown is also represented. So which one won, sometimes in the different order than you recall, perhaps, but the sort of the ratio of votes, popularity and whatnot. we always have a two majority system, seemingly. Like the two main parties. Which the two main parties are has changed. Federalist, Democratic, Republican, Southern Democrat, Northern Democrat, Republican, Whig. So there's all sorts of different parties, but there's usually two that are the main parties, and that's the way people think. And that's as you can read also in the second link, the two-party theory, Dovinger's law. If you have voting districts where there's one person, so you need to find the one person of the pool of candidates running against each other, and there's a couple of other factors, but essentially I need to pick one person. It's easier to pick one person from two people. And if you have more than two people, then if you vote for a third or a fourth candidate, you end up splitting the vote, or basically your vote doesn't count, right? So anyway, it's an interesting article, but the take home is that our current structure of representative government drives towards having a two-party system. Just the nature of the way. The other critical component of this is the what is it? They describe it as first past the post. So the winner take all, right? The majority, like, oh, you got more votes, you win. So that simple majority voting scheme, or plurality, if there's more than two, leads to having two dominant parties. So that's just the nature of how things work. So interesting article, something to look into more if you're curious about how voting works. And then coincidentally, I have a link to the ranked voting Wikipedia page, which is also interesting. Ranked voting is making an appearance in some elections in the United States. It's an interesting idea. Something that's often, I guess, misunderstood is that there is ranked choice voting. If you flip through that article, you will hopefully begin. The Wikipedia is rarely the place to end your search for knowledge, but it's a good place to begin. There's a few different ways to handle ranked choice voting, ranked voting. It's worth looking at and considering, and how that might impact multiple candidate election processes at any local, state, federal, etc. So in keeping with the format of the show, what works with our two-party system? In the U.S., there's a natural tendency to treat most competitions as a matter of my team versus your team. I can't imagine anybody could argue with that at this point. Essentially pugilistic battle, but the weapons are ballots or baseballs, or with more boxing and UFC out there. What is it? What does UFC stand for? Unencumbered, I don't know, UFC. Universal Fighting Champions, right? Isn't that something like that? Clearly I'm a fan. But with more boxing and UFC out there, there are actual fists. So basically more so with those types of sports. So full contact, one-on-one, true pugilism versus team pugilism, like fighting each other with baseballs and runs, or yards or whatever, right? Or ballots. So the battle between political ideologies, or campaign promises anyway. Maintaining a one-on-one scenario on the national scale. So for the president of the United States, of course, and even for representatives in Congress. I say representatives, but I mean in the House and also senators. So, and by the way, that is something that I think can confuse now and then. Congress people typically are the members of the House, even though the Senate is also a part of the Congress. When you say a representative or rep, you're speaking of someone in the House, but the senators are still also your representatives. But technically, they represent the states and not the people. Something to think about. So the elections and so on, they fit into this two-party, this us versus them, fits into the national mindset. It is easier to track two teams. Anybody who's watched some of these characters on cable news channels, where they get very excited about, oh, look at that, this, and then this could happen, and then these states, if they get this three, that they'll have enough votes. So everybody loves having two candidates in a sort of a horse race. But if you have three or four, maybe back in the Ross Perot days, like, I don't know what to do. There's 3 candidates. That's crazy. It's a simple matter to understand the notions of winning and losing if there's one of each, right? So plurality, and this was an issue in the 2024 election. No, there was a majority. I'm sorry, there was a 2-party, like 2 parties got the vast majority of votes, but the winner of the 2024 election in the presidential race did not have a majority of votes. It was a plurality. It was not a landslide or a mandate or anything. So it was it 47 or 49% or something? So it was not 50+%. So when you have vote, I don't know if you would argue that was vote splitting, but when you have more than 2 parties, you're going to end up with votes going to other parties. That's just the way it is. So the 2-party system, though, is convenient with 3rd and 4th and so on parties having an impact, but usually they don't get attention or focus, which is probably unfortunate, which I will mention later. It depends on your view. You may think that's fine. We only need 2 parties. We don't need any others. But others might think different. Once in office, an elected leader is presumed to be a member of the team. I think that's hard to argue with in the present state of affairs. Whichever of the 2, with a built-in coalition and a built-in message, of course, which you all should get behind on your side of the line. Aisle, perhaps. Platform with planks. It comes with the job. And, of course, strong possibilities for support and collaboration. You'll probably get some money for your next campaign, and that's the key, getting reelected. This makes for predictable outcomes, which I would argue makes the general population more comfortable. This is also true of judges for some reason. That's probably a different episode, but the presumption that whoever nominated or appointed whoever appointed a particular judge, they should, of course, vote for the person that nominated them, not vote for, but rule in favor of. And that always bothers me, but that's a different topic. So predictable outcomes, us versus them. We have the majority. We're the party in power. Everything I want, I'll get. Kind of breaks the whole negotiation compromise idea. But this may not be... predictable outcomes makes the population more comfortable. Like I said, this may not be true in the most recent of times, however, if the levels of awareness of deviations is kept to a minimum. So... when the parties disagree, or when Congress is not even participating in government anymore, as long as you don't talk about it too much, then it's not a big deal. So as long as that's the case, then the 2-party system enables these teams to collaborate, ideally for efficient operation of our government. So, yay. On an interpersonal level, associating with like-minded people, so these are just we, the people, the voters, the electorate, or people who are not in the electorate, but you still have a political mindset. Associating with like-minded people is often a matter of your church affiliations, your people in your workplace. Some workplaces that frown on political conversation, I would tend to agree in some cases. Proximity in neighborhoods, like, hey, we're having an elephant party tonight. Come on by. And sports, of course. Political parties fit into this mode, as I mentioned, but also they are very easy to associate with actual activities. So you can actually participate in some fundraising and door knocking. You can go to rallies and protests. You can get out to vote efforts on the election day itself, driving people to polling places, whatever else. Yeah, so there's pro-action with this long-term outcome possible. That's not necessarily true with sports. It could be with some church groups or in your workplace. So it kind of fits into there, right? So you want to hang out with people that have similar opinions on things so that you're not confrontational and you're not arguing. I think that's just human nature. So go along, get along, whatever, that kind of stuff. So having 2 parties makes it easy to find people who are on your team. Like, oh, you're a centrist Democrat, I'm a progressive Democrat, whatever, right? That makes it a little bit more complicated. But as long as you just look for the D or the R, you're good. What is the I? You can just go wherever you want. Is that what you think? Anyway, what does not work about our 2-party system? These are my views. You may differ. You may even have different views on what does work. Political parties in the U.S. are so-called big tent parties, where differing opinions are certainly allowed. In fact, they want you join the party. Sure, we'll take that position if it makes you happy. So we'll get large swaths of the population based on expanding, more flexible view of certain things. And by the way, this is why it's important to always be aware that a political party is not necessarily a political alignment. If you use the spectrum with the left, right, so liberal, conservative, and then sometimes it'll be a two-dimensional spectrum, so it'll be authoritarian and libertarian. So like how much power government can exert in general, your mileage may vary, but the political parties move around a little bit. Sometimes they switch places. So you can never really look back through history and say, oh, I'm a Lincoln Republican. That's not so easy to do, because in the interim, the Republican Party has changed its viewpoints and its behaviors, and the people that are part of it have changed, and so on. The same is true on the left as well. So it comes down to individuals looking at the two parties, right? I might have some opinions that are more right-leaning than left-leaning. There might be a third or fourth, but all that really, the normal voter is not going to say, well, maybe I'll go with the Green Party or the Libertarian Party or the whatever, pick a few more. But for all but the really intense voters, they might go with third, fourth parties. Election day will come down to one of these two parties for practicality. It's like, I'm just going to go with the Democrats. Some people are very, very, very set in their political party affiliation. And they may even treat other parties as the enemy, right? The us-them component. And I'm concerned at that point, again, because if you're a staunch Republican, or, famously the Kennedy family, for example, staunch Democrats, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are, well, I'm sure they were aware, I'm sure they were paying attention, but the Democratic Party has changed its opinions, so has the Republican Party, and so have the other parties. So you kind of have to adapt with the modern day issues and so on. So to just say I'm a Republican no matter what, or vote blue no matter who, that kind of stuff. Political parties are not necessarily political ideologies. They want to win regardless, right? So it's something to keep in mind. And so rarely will this be a perfect fit if I need to find a party that fits me, if I want to find a party that fits me. And so a two-party system is a convenience, a compromise, maybe even settling for the least problematic party. Like, I don't like either, but I guess the one that causes me the least amount of angst would be fill in the blank. This limits the ability of an individual to select representatives which are aligned with their own values or views. Voters must essentially join a coalition up front on voting for a particular candidate. So rather than letting the politicians duke it out, between different party affiliations, you end up with that two teams, a pre-built coalition, right? The coalition is established when they get to office, wherever they're going. So it's a coalition of the voters, not necessarily the candidates or the elected official once they're in office. If there are more than two candidates to select from, a fraction of the electorate votes for a third party sometimes, there's a real possibility that a less popular or less capable candidate may win due to vote splitting. This has happened, of course. And then the question is, does that serve the democratic ends, small d, democratic? Arguably, yes. But in our two-party system, when you vote for a third party and you do split the vote, the outcomes are maybe not what was desirable. So that can be something of a problem when the elected candidate gets to office. Because remember, those coalitions are pre-built. So a person that does not represent the majority of opinions, and if you have more than two parties, that's going to probably be the case too. But the person they'll get to office and they're already in one of the two parties, right? The two caucuses. So there's less opportunity for cross-party coalitions to be built in whatever governing body they're a part of. So even though the representative might still represent a lot of their particular district or state or wherever, they don't have to worry about making friends when they get to office. So if an independent gets elected, like Bernie Sanders, he caucuses with the Democrats, so he has made friends, quote unquote, with Democrats. He could also side with Republicans on some issues. That doesn't mean that the parties can't, they say reach across the aisle occasionally, and this was happening more in the past than it is lately. But sometimes you vote on issues not with party line votes. It would be interesting to see what would happen if the U.S. House of Representatives, for example, was made up of substantial numbers of third and fourth parties. And so that coalitions would need to be formed there. And how would they represent their districts? It would be interesting to see. In that case, districts. Right. Each of the main two parties in the United States are private corporations. That's something to think about. They happen to drive campaigns, which maximizes donations and donation potential, but also gives each of the committees, so the Democratic National Committee, the Republican National Committee, the right to decide where big money flows. In some cases, they decide to back a strategic candidate rather than a popular candidate. You can make a few guesses about when that's happened for presidential elections, for example, but it could happen anywhere online. That's one reason you affiliate with a large party like one of those two, is that there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of potential for unified messaging, ad campaigns, endorsements, all that stuff. You can, with these entities, each of the parties, their committees, select and back their choice to run in various elections at various levels of our government. They are subverting, I would say, the democratic process. For example, even though primary elections are not constitutionally defined, they are consequential and they are left basically to the committees to run. Am I saying primary should be defined in law? No, but it is important to understand that they pick the candidates who will run in primaries. They will steer things the way they want, etc. Obviously, even though people believe the democratic process was corrupted in the selection of a candidate in the 2024 election, the fact is they don't have to have primaries. It's a cultural norm, I guess. It's the way we do it. But from a practicality standpoint, if there's a different path that must be followed in the interest of time or whatever, they want to win. They are not necessarily concerned with making everyone happy, which is ironic, I suppose. Interesting to note, perhaps, the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, is a for-profit private corporation. The Republican National Committee, the RNC, is a not-for-profit private corporation. Allegedly, I perhaps a deeper dive would reveal. I mean, these things can change, right? Maybe they want to go nonprofit on the DNC side, whatever, who knows? With so much money floating around and so many options for so-called dark money and whatnot, it's entirely possible that each of these has other entities associated, affiliated, or maybe arm's length for other activities. I don't know what I'm talking about. A national two-party structure, as we have, can create non-democratic, and that's with a small d, non-democratic power structure as we see today, where lockstep voting blocks along party lines essentially filter out the views of the electorate at large. And this is what I was kind of touching on with the third and fourth parties entering Congress, for example. Do they represent how much of their electorate in their districts, or whoever voted for them, whoever didn't vote for them, how do they represent those people when they're in office? That's a question of communication, perhaps. But then you have to worry about, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but you have to build coalition when you are in office and align with certain issues. But you can align on issues rather than along party lines. So that's what I think is interesting. But in the case of the two-party system, you pretty much get there and you are in a voting block. And when news reports are, concerning most voting lately in Congress, the vote was along party lines. It's not even a thought anymore. It's just a presumption that that's what it'll be, which I think is unfortunate. It's particularly problematic in the U.S. Senate, which often represents, okay, let me start over. This is particularly problematic in the U.S. Senate, which offers representative equity to states. So each state has two senators. That's equity, right? Doesn't matter what's going on. You have two senators. Everybody gets two. No matter how many people live in your state, you get two votes. Two senators. So an entire voting block in the Senate may have a majority of the Senate votes, but which might represent a minority of the population across the entire electorate, because the majority of states that are represented in the Senate, when you sum up their populations, can be less than some of the larger states in the United States. And you might argue, well, that's what the Senate is for. But some of the issues that have been decided based on Senate majority have been vastly problematic for the majority of the people. So having this whole big state, small state notion and representing each state with this equity concern, the great compromise, right? The two houses of legislature and all this, seems like a nice idea when the states were small. If you look at the original 13 colonies, the original 13 states, they were small. New York did not have 10 million people living in Manhattan, right? So there's a vast difference between the well-meaning, well-intended notion of state representation, but it's not really practical when you have states that are bigger than countries and other states that are 10 people. Everybody in the state met yesterday. It's not funny, and it shouldn't matter that much. The population of a state should not determine some things, like the participation of the 10 people in their government, right? We the people. But it should not make a state that is relatively small overpowered in the Senate, which decides on things like advice and consent issues. We've already seen that being a problem in some cases. Like, why does one person with such a tiny a fraction of the overall population wield so much power in national issues? Well, we have a two-party system, the majority party, etc. So what might we do about it? By the way, politics and religion are the two things you don't talk about in pubs, because it is usually where people disagree and then fights ensue. Pites? I don't know how I said that one. But maybe this is interesting to you. So I have some ideas, and not all of them will fit in today's episode, but I have notions. Political parties are not constitutionally defined, nor specifically constrained, which means there is not specific requirement that there be two main parties. What was the guy's name? Devinger's law? Duvergers. There's no N. Duverger. Oh, Duverger. Okay, Duverger's law. Nice. I said it wrong before. Duverger's law. So parties are not constrained, which means there's no specific requirement there be two main parties. The ability for alternative parties or alternative candidates to participate in an election process is a challenge that could be overcome if the power the two main party committees have to shape an election process is reduced and perhaps distributed to nonpartisan entities. This is an effort that could begin at a local government level and grow out to other localities. So as with most things with politics, it starts local. The effort to get big money out of politics is a similar undertaking, largely uphill. But if you have candidates in your local city council elections, county commissions, other such beginnings, it may be interesting to grassroots it, right? Like, in the city of Las Vegas, you have to, you're capped, your campaign spend is capped based on how you do at the slots. No. I'm kidding, but getting big money out of elections first, or is one of the things. But generally, each candidate should have equal access to the ballot, right? If the ballot, not petition, but you go get signatures to get on a ballot. That is reasonable. Could be modernized a little bit, but making it, I'll just say more possible, whatever that means, less oppressive, so that third and fourth and fifth party candidates can get on a ballot. And you'll see this more often in local elections, that you do have more than two candidates for a particular role or district. So maybe focusing on local elections and then highlighting the benefits of having these options when they are available is a part of that initial step that I've just described. So get the big private corporations that are out to merely win elections, regardless of what that really means, right? DNC just wants to win. RNC just wants to win. That's really what they want. And then they want to win again next time and get a lot of money in the interim. So yeah, maybe highlighting the outcomes of local or elections that have more candidates from multiple parties would be interesting. By the way, you should look at the election of 1860 when Abraham Lincoln from the third party, the Republican Party was the third party, or a nod of the two main parties. So there were a few different candidates from different parties in that election, and the Republican Party gained prominence when he won, of course. So I think there was a national Republican Party and the Republican Party, and then I think it was Southern Democrat, Northern Democrat, and then the Whigs. Was that it? I thought there were 7. Who knows? Clearly I've demonstrated I don't have perfect memory on this stuff. I need to do some refreshment. Vote splitting is an issue with more than 2 candidates for a particular role or district or whatever. Duverger's, however I pronounce it before, law, right? When you have one person for a particular district or role is more obvious, but we can only elect one person in this ward or this district. So 2 parties is easier to manage, and so on and so on. Why not introduce ranked choice voting more broadly? Sometimes this method is described as too complicated, too confusing. Just vote one or the other and that's it. But depending on how the ranking is implemented and how submitted ranked votes are counted, and they should be counted transparently, of course. But whether it's the couple of examples given in the Wikipedia article are instant runoff or the weighted counting. The instant runoff seems kind of interesting. But anyway, the general notion is ranked choice voting is a collection of voting methodologies that are not simple majority or plurality, really. So the outcomes can be closer to reaching actual voter intent. I really want to get that the nerd party candidate, but my second choice would be Green Party. And my third choice will be a Democrat or a Republican or something. So something like that. Since a vote for a third party candidate can be backed with a second choice among the 2 main parties, for example, or a third choice. So long as this 2-party dominance continues, that would be the case, right? So you would essentially make your default or your safety candidate, like your safety school, if you were applying to multiple colleges, like, all right, I know one of these 2 is going to win anyway, but at least I can voice my opinion with a protest vote that doesn't necessarily throw my vote away. So I can pick my third party candidate as my first choice and make the mainstream, arguably corrupt candidates one of my second choices. Anyway, so yeah, enabling more flexible voting to enable multiple candidates without splitting or without throwing away your vote, right? Which is, I'm going to vote for the person, I'm going to vote for the third party who has like a 0% popularity or polling shows that they're not going to win, but I'm going to vote for them anyway. Well, that problems can ensue, right? So you should be able to have a ranked choice vote that you can issue a protest vote, but you can also not throw away your vote in that if the scheme is implemented such that is the case. Anyway, final point, final section. This is it. Direct input from the electorate is more possible today than ever. Today is possible today more than ever, something like that. With so much potential for direct reflection on choices made by representatives and then informing them directly with that opinion. So if my representative is not doing their job, I should reach out to them. Horsford, what's his first name? I can't remember. District 4 in Nevada. Horsford, what is his first name? Horsford. He makes the news every once in a while, so that's good for him. Democrat. But if whether I was a Democrat or Republican or independent or I'm non-NP, when you register to vote in Nevada, if you don't pick a party affiliation, they put you as NP. I don't know if that means nonpartisan but it's unaffiliated, right? So I should be able to talk to my representative regardless of my party, regardless if we are in the same party, regardless of whether I voted for him. Because once you have the job, it's not a question of a political competition to get the win. It's now you represent me regardless of our agreements. This has been historically left to the voting box. Well, if you don't like your candidate, vote them out of office next time. And that's why the House of Representatives has a 2-year term, so that it allows for rapid turnover. If you're not popular, then you get the boot. The non-form letter messages have been accepted, forever, the whole time. You can always write to your government official, or I think visiting them might be more of a challenge. Communication with our representatives at any level of government should take place on a regular basis. In modernity, that we absolutely have that possibility at our disposal, not merely on election day. And regardless of whether the individual in office was the one you voted for, they should not worry about, did you vote for me? Right? That doesn't matter. You represent me now. So I'm going to tell you what I think about how you're voting or how you're not showing up for work. What's all these vacations for the Congress? Are they ever in session? Really? Party affiliation must cease to be a consideration in office when working with the constituents, with the people you represent. And this must be clear on all sides. Oh, I didn't vote for that congressperson. I didn't vote for my representative. So therefore what? You should still call them. You should still write to them, whatever the preference is. Electronic communications with our government officials should be par for the course now. You should be able to interact on a regular basis if you want to. There's always a debate over whether representatives in our form of government should be voting with where the wind blows, right? Oh, I'm always polling my constituents and doing what they tell me, versus acting with agency, like you voted me into office and now I'm going to try to make the best decisions. That is the first thing that the electorate in that particular district or ward or section or whatever, they should be able to reflect on that all the time. Like, hey, you're making good decisions, but they don't align with what everybody here wants. That's worthy of a discussion, town hall meetings and so on. So yeah, the two-party system, I think, is an anachronism of sorts. It is entrenched thanks to big money and the fact that these are companies, these are corporate entities that are driving the two main parties. They wield too much power to try to keep third and fourth and so on parties out of fair competition in the certainly in the election landscape. So I think change is hard, but I think it'd be interesting to highlight cases where third and other, where non-majority parties, non-Democrat and Republican, perhaps at the local level around the country, where having a person in office who is not one of the two main parties actually is fine. You can look at Mamdani in New York, mayor of New York now. He is a democratic socialist, not a social democrat. There is a difference, and that's another problem, is that everybody thinks they know what the main two parties stand for. They probably don't. But I would be profoundly surprised if I went through and tried to actually see what things I thought they each stood for. Like, oh, I thought nope. So don't Republicans want to reduce government spending? Nope, not at all. So Democratic Socialists, Social Democrats, look that up at some point when you're curious. But he is in a more farther left side of a Democratic Party, right? So they're to the left of the Democratic Party. So to say he's a Democrat, not really true. But we can also watch and see what he does with the city of New York, which has a pretty good population. And he's tackling some interesting issues. So what happens when you don't have someone from the big parties, but someone who is voted in for ideas and support from the electorate rather than support from a particular committee, right? So anyway, I think that'll be interesting to watch. And as this occurs through the country on a smaller scale, we should learn from this, and we should say, oh, you don't necessarily have to have an R or D by your name to make positive impact, to make things happen, to address real problems, to elevate communities, So I am not a fan of two-party system. I think there should be more options. I think it would be a mess in our Congress for a while. But if you could have 4 or 5 parties and they can build coalitions around issues, rather than just saying, oh, okay, you're in the Green Party, but you're going to always caucus with the Democrats. Well, then you stop having the freedom of properly representing not only the people who voted for you, but your constituents at large, right? The population that you represent. If you say, oh, even though I was elected as a Green Party member, I'm now going to just be a Democrat. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what is the issue today? I agree with the right this time, the left that time, the people in the middle. What does it mean to be a centrist? All this. So that's my view. You might differ. I'm going to guess you do. Conversation at some point. Well, we got to get some arguments going. Friendly and constructive arguments, please. That's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, as always. I should have a vote on my website if I ever improve my website. And I'll always have more than 2 choices. Anyway, yeah, thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. Links to all of my other programs are there. And that's about it. Take care now. Have a good week. Whenever you're listening to this, why not have a good week, right? Should always be on the table. Thank you. Bye-bye.